Why is it, by the way, that this is always a one-way street? Iran said this, Iran threatened this. This is about a regime change war. Why are we doing this?
Yes, I think it's quite clear that Benjamin Netanyahu wants regime change in Iran, but that is not the same as the regime in Iran wanting to destroy Israel.
What was overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi? Was that simply replacing the leader, or was that destroying the country?
Let's stick to Israel and Iran.
No.
The Israelis say we want regime.
No. I read this one book by this guy who was in the CIA, and the CIA actually. Guess who I am? I'm Dave Smith.
3 years away from so I'm the
because I'm leading countries on the say-so of Israel.
This isn't a secret. He's advocating that we fight more wars, and I'm telling you that this war, which we do not need to fight, which is not
often both ever launched and ended on the strength of popular support or opposition. When the stakes are so high and the consequences are so significant, everybody gets a say. In my view, that applies even if you haven't been to the place where it's happening. Much of the debate about the Iran crisis and
what do beans have to do with this?
others seems to boil down to some big themes: morality versus reality, idealism or pragmatism, intervention versus isolation, populists or lobbyists. For a big picture debate on a world at war, I'm joined by two of our favourite uncensored contributors who often trade respectful barbs on these matters and more. Kisin is an author, satirist and co-host of True Knowledge. Dave Smith is a libertarian commentator, a comedian and the host of Part of the Problem. Well, welcome to both of you. Dave, great to have you back so soon. As you know, after your last appearance, I got chewed up and spat across cyberspace, which I found quite an amusing thing to watch go down. What did you make of it?
Oh, I thought it was just so pathetic. Yeah. I mean, you know, I had mentioned this before, but if you, as I'm sure you do recall, but after my friend Daryl Cooper was on Tucker Carlson's show and he made some comments that you objected to, and I was defending him and giving my point of view on it, you had me on a panel. It's probably the most contentious that me and you have been on the show. You had me on 3-on-1 with it was Seth Dillon and then a world-renowned historian from the House of Lords, you know, like the leading expert.
He actually is, Andrew Roberts, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I took my lumps. I tried to make my argument as compelling as I could. It was I didn't go online and just throw a bitch fest for the next week over how unfair it was. It's just pathetic. And I'm sorry, but Natasha was just lying through her teeth the whole time. And and lies that, as you pointed out, insult the intelligence of the host and the viewers. And I thought you were absolutely right to give her pushback for that. So it was, I thought, number one, I thought you were right on the show. Obviously, admittedly, I'm a little bit biased on the topic, but I thought the reaction online was just truly embarrassing.
You know what was interesting? If they'd actually just said to me, you know what, Piers, did you go a little bit too far in the interrupting? Could you have reined back 10, 20%? I probably would have said yes, probably. I conceded that as a friend of mine. Yeah, probably slightly overdid. My mother's always a good litmus test. She was like, you did go at her a bit, you know. I was like, okay. But then I was reminded that she was telling massive whoppers with real consequential elements to them, denying, you know, appalling things like the killing of the 9 out of 10 children in that one airstrike and so on, or at least trying to cast doubt over whether it had been proven, which I just found so reprehensible. But also, I just felt this is somebody who purports to be an international barrister in this area, who's clearly has got a horse in the race, right? Because it's lawyers for Israel, who she represents. If you can't handle a bit of interrupting from someone like me, you're probably in the wrong profession, is what I thought. It's like, it's supposed to be part of your job, literally arguing with people, often in an animated way. Anyway, let's get into this argument. Because this was precipitated, for those who don't follow you guys as assiduously as I do, and I'm a big fan of both of you. Constantine, you called out Dave on X for accusing the actor Rob Schneider of talking with confidence on topics he doesn't necessarily...
I feel sometimes like Constantine has like an army person's build. Like I don't know if it's like the head. I feel like, oh, that's an army guy. Not just making any, like, the army phenotype. Yeah, not saying good or bad or dumb or anything like that. I'm just saying, I feel like if he were to show up and start, like, barking, his hair needs to be buzzed a little more. Or whatever. Like, he would have the army guy phenotype a little bit. No?
Understand. You said
he's got a soldier skull.
That's exactly what Douglas Murray had accused Dave of doing when they had a spat on Joe Rogan. And you said, on X, I'm not trying to be a dick, but this is exactly what Douglas was saying to you. He was saying you talk about things you don't understand with a level of confidence that is inappropriate, and you pretended he was calling for censorship. You can't have it both ways. Okay, you've got Dave sitting here. You don't want to be a dick, which I appreciate, because I've had a festival of that from George Galloway this week. So let's not get into dick measurement contests. But this whole argument, really, about people who are supposedly ill-equipped to talk about things, whether it's Dave because he's a comedian by stock in trade, whether it's Rob Schneider, whether it's anyone really. Explain where you come from on that.
Well, first of all, you say it's been precipitated by this. I think the disagreements between Dave and I run about as long as the Iran-Israel conflict, so, and probably longer. So we disagree on a lot of stuff. You've invited me on your show many, many times over the last year. I've always said no when talking about this stuff because I don't consider myself an expert on these issues, which is why I've consistently turned it down. The only reason I'm here tonight, by the way, is you said to me, I'm not going on your show until you come back on mine, and I thought that was actually fair enough. So particularly given that you have me here with somebody who's also not an expert, this is essentially two guys in a box.
Not white, but doesn't there exist a good faith argument that we shouldn't let races of people disappear from the planet in the same vein that we should protect endangered species or birds and fish, etc.? Or should humanity just naturally beige out? No, I think there's a natural ebb and flow to culture and civilization, and it's always happened. And the obsession with trying to preserve like certain things and pretend that things will never change is a very recent I would almost argue, Eurocentric obsession with the idea that some things can be put into a museum and preserved forever. Like, there are races of people that will come and go. There are languages that will come and go. There are all sorts of things that will come and go as humanity and civilization ebbs and flows. It's never been different, and that's probably never going to change.
Bar in a pub chatting about their opinion. So that's fine. However, I think the reality is that an issue of this complexity and seriousness should not be addressed by a former comedian and a current comedian. I don't really think that's the right approach. But my point to Dave is something else. My point to Dave is whenever he wants to take a shortcut and disagree with someone who's saying something that's different to him, he will resort to exactly the same thing that Douglas said to him, which is, you actually don't really know what you're talking about. You don't have the expertise to talk about this. You haven't been to the region. You haven't read enough. You haven't done this. You haven't done that. And that's exactly what Douglas was saying to Dave. Now, you can agree or disagree with whether that's right or wrong, but the fact that Dave is violating his own standards, seems to me to be pretty hypocritical.
That's definitely not recent or European, haha. This is a global trend, you racist smiley face. Wait, I can't tell if that whole thing was a joke, or I don't know if there have ever been points in the past where people have obsessed about preserving like ethnicities or languages or races of people. Maybe there have been, and I'm not aware of it, which is fully possible, but.
Dave, you're a rank hypocrite.
That's what Piers saying, and not me. I did not add the word rank.
Yeah, you would have
Okay,
done it if
that's
you thought
true.
about it.
No, I'm sorry. There's for the record, I just want to say me and Rob Schneider made.
I think it's okay, for the record, I think it's okay in an actual, not a non-metaphorical sense, but in an actual sense, I think it's okay to preserve stuff in like preservation areas. But some people delude themselves into thinking that they can maintain the freshness of a thing, or that they can perpetually recycle things in a culture and have them being, relevant and new. I guess, like, even thinking from a musical background, like, as much as obviously playing the saxophone in college, like, jazz is a big part of it, whatever, but like old jazz is never going to sound good to people again. You're going to have to remix it or find a way to reintegrate it into contemporary music. Just stuff that people liked a long time ago, people won't necessarily like today. People's musical vocabulary has changed significantly. The instruments available to us, the cultural context in which music appears as like background to TV shows or in music in your car or whatever else. These things change as time goes on. Like, that's fine. Culture, arts, everything changes as time goes on. It's okay. That includes language, race of people, all that as well.
Made up. I've always been a big fan of his. We message back and forth, and we're cool. But no, I'm sorry. Obviously, this is ridiculous, and there's no hypocrisy here at all. It is if we were to come to a debate, and what I brought to the debate was I just said, "Shut up," and that was all I did for the debate, was just tell you to shut up. And I had no argument, and I didn't counter any of your arguments, but I just told you to shut up. And you were to say, man, that was a really ridiculous way to debate. And then I pointed out that you had also told someone to shut up once in your life. That wouldn't mean you're guilty of hypocrisy. It's a completely different standard to be dismissive to someone on Twitter than to agree to debate them on the biggest show in the world, show up in front of tens of millions of people, and your argument essentially is just to dismiss them. Your point doesn't matter. So no, and also, clearly, I wasn't telling Rob Schneider because he's a comedian, he can't have an opinion on this. I was telling him that I don't really think he knows what he's talking about on this issue.
Where you got winning on this one? I don't know. Constantine, it appears to have become much more reasonable over the past few months. I don't know why. Dave Smith, to his credit, does read, but unfortunately that just makes him the smartest idiot in the room, because the things he chooses to read are always, like, my guess is if I were to open like Dave Smith's library, I would probably see like, the true version of Vietnam and how America fabricated the whole incident, all about the Gulf of Tonkin or whatever, I don't know what it's called. And then like 1967, Israel at war, what you didn't learn about the USS Liberty, and then the war in Iraq, or the CIA's war against America, a true story of the Second Gulf War. Or like it's just like these are all of the types of like you can always tell with people like this, because the citations that they go to are always to like, this former CIA guy said this, and that former CIA guy said, and this guy said, and it's always like a former CIA dude or a single quote from a former guy who used to be the head of something. It's always like these types of things, and they never argue in like macro, broader understandings, although Dave tries to. But it's always like these types of things, and I can tell that. But I mean, I'll give him props for at least reading something, because he does demonstrate at least some level of knowledge that's higher than the ordinary dipshits that make the circuits, or that run the circuits on these shows. But God, it's so tiring.
And then
Which is exactly what Douglas said to you.
Yes, but he didn't back it up with anything. That's the point.
And by the way,
no one would have had a problem. The whole point was that Douglas had an opportunity to demonstrate his superior level of expertise and did not. And this is the overwhelming opinion.
Well, I don't think that's quite true. I think on a lot of the subjects you debated, he actually did give very good reasons why he disagreed. Now, as you remember, I wrote an article at the time talking about that situation. I did concede that I thought Douglas should have lent more into the arguments. The way you and I have always debated has been on that basis, right? And I think that is true. But I don't think this argument about Twitter really works, because when you go on our mutual friend Joe Rogan's show, you're in front of millions of people. When you and I are exchanging, or you and Rob are exchanging arguments on X, we're also in front of millions of people. We're also having a debate. I don't understand what the difference is.
You don't understand the difference between like dismissing someone on Twitter and agreeing to debate them and showing up with
Rob
nothing but
made a series
them?
of arguments on Twitter to you in front of those same millions of people that saw you on Joe Rogan, and instead of addressing his arguments with counter arguments, which is the standard that you normally apply and you demand that other people apply to you, you instead basically said, shut up, Rob, you don't know what you're talking about.
Piers.
Just because you read one book doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, which is exactly what a lot of people said to you, and you got very upset about it and pretended they were trying to censor you.
No, okay, there's a couple different things here. Number one, Piers, as I told you, I believe were my first appearance after the Douglas Murray debate on Joe Rogan. And the first thing I said to you was that I go, look, there's been a lot of people who have been challenged to debates who say, I'm not going to debate that guy. He's beneath me. I've done that with other people. And then there's been people who accept and show up to the debate. I said, Douglas Murray's fatal flaw was that he did both. He accepted and...
Just one of my favorite debates in life. It wasn't even necessarily a huge debate. Just getting to tear into this disgusting woman for being the start of destroying my mom's brain. Not even, actually. Her brain was destroyed far before by conservatives. God, this fucking Sarah Palin. Just having Dave Smith sitting here saying fuck off for the entirety of this conversation because he was so out of his depth between me and Mehdi. Oh my God, it felt so good. He is smart. He is smart to avoid me, though, in any other debate or confrontation. I do give him props to know his limits, at least. What a submissive little dipshit.
Then showed up and said, I'm above you, I shouldn't even be debating you. And it backfired on him. Now, as far as I'm sorry, what was your second point there? I had another response to that. What was the other thing you said, Constantine?
I don't remember the sequence of the points that I made. What do you mean exactly?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna save you both, because I think we've probably dealt with the element about whether you should be debating or talking about these things. You're both here to talk about stuff. Enough about 9 to 5. What about the most important
What
bit,
about
the 5 to 9?
9/11?
You want 40% cozy. Donald.com, promo code Piers. Stay cool. Constantine, let me start with what you said. Donald Trump, you believe, has played an absolute blinder in the Middle East. Dave, to put it mildly, does not agree and thinks he should now be impeached for betrayal. So first of all, Constantine, why in your...
Wait.
Does not agree. Trump, you believe, has played an absolute blinder in the Middle East.
Has played an absolute blunder? Well, I need a longer translation. What the fuck is he saying? Hold on.
Let me start with what you said. Donald Trump, you believe, has played an absolute blinder in the Middle East.
What does it mean to play a blinder? Played a blinder equals done well. Messed up real bad. Blinder equals good. Blinder is a genius 4D chess move. Okay.
Dave, to put it mildly...
Wait, Constantine thinks Trump has done something really well in the Middle East? Is that okay? We'll see.
Does not agree and thinks he should now be impeached for betrayal. So first of all, Constantine, why in your estimation has Trump played an absolute blinder?
I feel like we're entering a realm where more and more people are entering political commentary for the exposure, but have zero knowledge or background. Yeah, and it's just so tiring, and it feels like such a joke. Why do I still hear the same recycled arguments about hold on. We've listened to the Victoria Nuland call on stream, right? Maybe I should bring this up more. Just so you're aware, this is like the entire proof. Every time somebody says the United States 100% orchestrated the 2014 foreign-backed coup, Euromaidan in Ukraine, they're citing to this singular phone call.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Would you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got, and he's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, okay. I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
Does it not sound like they're game planning? Well, it sounds like they're having a conversation about like leaders that they would prefer to negotiate with in Ukraine, or people that they think would be better for Ukraine and then for the United States being a partner to Ukraine. But it's the Assistant Secretary of State. This is, of course, we're going to have opinions and ideas about this, and of course we're going to be in communication with other people. Nothing about this has anything to do with like cooing the government or fomenting a revolution on the ground. That's what this phone call is.
So
this is their jobs. This is part of what the State Department does. Is communicating with leaders in other nations and talking to people that might be part of the government or might not be a part of the government. Like, that's what this is.
It would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land Jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So okay. Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.
This is the singular phone call that gets cited every time you hear somebody say over and over and over again, the Nuland call, the Nuland call, the Nuland call. This is what gets cited as proof that the United States fomented the entire Euromaidan. This is what they're talking about. But sorry, we bridge off on this because it's the people getting into politics that have no understanding or idea of what's going on. Yeah, I don't know. There are still plenty of people. I guarantee you, if you were to ask Dave Smith, I think I've heard him say it within the past several months. Like, he'll cite this phone call over and over again of proof that we instigated all of Euromaidan. And it's just like, yeah, it's so stupid. Destiny, none of this shows that they initiated or started a coup, but it sounds a little like they're taking advantage of it in the aftermath. Yes, when there are countries that are undergoing huge political movements, every country in the world is going to have a position on what is most beneficial to them, the types of leaders that they would want to reach out to, the people that they want to talk to. You have to be, hold on. Let me bring it down. Sorry, hold on. Okay, sorry. I was about to say a bunch of mean things to you. Everybody should have a position on this. Everybody will have a position on this. It would be incredibly stupid and short-sighted to not position your government in a way that you're ready to move into whatever comes next. But that's a lot different than causing a thing to happen, right? I don't know what you think your State Department is for, or what you think foreign diplomacy is for, or what, obviously.
To put this in context, I said this, I think, on Friday. I spent that week when these initial strikes happened in Washington, D.C., and the point that I was making is, I don't think that, certainly none of the people I met in Washington, D.C. with any insider knowledge thought that Benjamin Netanyahu, who'd ordered these...
I'm not saying it in a conspiratorial anti-West way, Destiny. I'm just trying to say I slightly see why it sounds sus. Yes, it sounds sus to people that are retarded and have no idea how anything functions, right? Imagine that some new company was going to come in and they were going to demolish a whole bunch of, they were going to demolish 100 square miles of dog park zones, and all these dogs were going to become homeless and die or whatever. And imagine you're like a company in the area and you see like the writing on the wall that's going to happen, and you're talking to people in your business like, okay, well, we got to talk to the mayor, and if they're going to be, demolishing all these places, and they're trying to, figure out who's going to be able to set up shop, like we want to be able to get some of this territory so that we can open up like a new business here or whatever, because a bunch of other people are going to do it. Imagine somebody leaking that phone and was like, these are the guys who wanted to destroy all the dog parks. It's like, no, this shit is happening whether you like it or not. There's a portion of your company that's dedicated to maneuvering inside of that environment, whether that means dealing with local officials or political people or other businesses. Like, this is part of your responsibility to your company. For our State Department, it's part of their responsibility to the country. Things are happening around the world. You always have to be ready to have conversations and adapt. And when you can, to exert some kind of like, influence or pressure, if you can, for things to go a certain way. This is just always going to be the case. There's nothing nefarious or bad or wrong about that. Every single person on the planet is doing it. Like, I feel like we're at a point right now where if I were to use other words, like I could do a conspiracy online. Did you know that the United States has literally constructed special operations rooms in every single country that it literally enjoys special protections that are internationally recognized, to where only Americans and people that Americans are allowed inside to conduct official business on other countries' soil, where inside these places they host people whose jobs sometimes can range from processing Americans there to communicating with local political officials. Like you could describe like an embassy in other words, and it would sound conspiratorial. It's like, wait, well, why does any country need their own special person in this country to talk to our political leaders? And it's like, stupid.
I don't think that, certainly none of the people I met in Washington, D.C. with any insider knowledge thought that Benjamin Netanyahu had ordered these strikes without at least a wink and a nod from President Trump. So President Trump is doing something that, from what I remember...
Happy Juneteenth. Can you please read this message out loud so I can prove to my GF that you love me? Guy Dinaz, your girlfriend thinks that I love her because me and her are trading crazy messages all the time. The only reason why we do that, though, is so that I can get her to leave the house and then stand her up to go meet me somewhere else so that you and I can make beautiful love to each other. Fuck her, okay? You don't need her. You just need me. So dump her and spend all the money that you spent on her on subscriptions for me instead. Thank you.
These strikes. I think on Friday, I spent that week when these initial strikes happened in Washington, D.C. And the point that I was making is, I don't think that, certainly none of the people I met in Washington, D.C. with any insider knowledge thought that Benjamin Netanyahu had ordered these strikes without at least a wink and a nod from President Trump. So President Trump is doing something that, from what I remember, he said it between 30 and 40 times on the campaign trail, which is Iran must not be allowed to get a bomb. And he's achieving that outcome while not taking any of the blame or any of the flag for it. That was the case on Friday. Obviously, the situation has evolved since then, and there's now a much bigger debate. But at that time, he had absolutely played a blinder in allowing Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli military to achieve the military objective, while also sort of claiming that he's not involved and kind of at that time...
If he now gets involved, as the Donald Trump seem to be suggesting, that is a massive moment for Donald Trump, I would say. I mean, you could argue that is the most important decision he will have taken as a president, and maybe the most important decision he ever takes. If he actually starts bombing with American forces Iran, that is a massive thing to be doing. Do you think it's, as Tucker Carlson says, something that could imperil his presidency?
We are in the unknown, so nobody knows how this is going to play out. I think we should all be honest about that and be fair. What I think it really fundamentally depends on is what you mean by the word involved. If you mean that America is going to help Israel shoot down ballistic missiles, I don't know that will be such a major decision or will be seen as...
Well, let me paint a picture.
I can't tell. I don't know if Constantine is evil or not, because over the past few months, I don't know if he's just the winds of change. He's changed because he demonstrates an understanding of things sometimes. This term of like, is America involved or did America plan the attacks? He's right. There's a huge difference between a lot of these things. Like when America moves ships or aircraft carriers, is this to strike Iran? Maybe, probably not. Maybe though, or it could just be to show, hey, if you attack any of our bases, you are going to get ass fucked brutally, okay, by the long dick of the HIMARS or whatever we shoot from our fucking ships, right? Or did Donald Trump tell Israel to attack? No. Really? I heard that they spoke beforehand. That's not him ordering it. Really? I heard that he didn't say no. I heard, in fact, that he approved it. He approved? What do you mean by approved? As in, of course, Israel is always going to communicate something like this. Always. You're never going to have a moment where Israel, or you shouldn't, where they're taking like majorly, potentially disruptive actions in a theater that we have a large investment in, the Middle East, and they're not even communicating that to the United States, because then if we were in the dark, well, that puts Israel in a weird spot too, and us in a weird spot. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. planned it, or that the U.S. assisted with the attack in the same way that if we intercept missiles, like, and you can say all of these things are bad, or some of these things are bad, or none of these things are bad. Like, you can have a position on all of that, but they are different. And Constantine at least recognized that. There's a difference between, is the U.S. helping Israel? What do you mean by helping, right? Like, do we intercept missiles? We've always done that. Fucking Jordan, Saudi Arabia, everybody else is doing that. But are we flying, sorties with them? Well, that's a different thing.
And be fair, what I think it really fundamentally depends on is what you...
HIMARS aren't a ship-based missile. It depends. If you have a boat that's large enough, and if you put your mom on the other end, you can put a HIMAR on the other end because she's so fat she counterbalances it.
mean by the word involved. If you mean that America is going to help Israel shoot down ballistic missiles, I don't know that that will be such a major decision or will be seen as...
Well, let me paint a picture where they use a B-52 bomber and they drop one of these buster bombs to try and get to the nuclear sites that the Israelis can't get to because they haven't got that technology. If they were to do that, in other words, directly use American forces to do the bombing, would your calculation about Trump change?
These are all hypotheticals. The one thing that I do know, and I think Dave will
It's pronounced HIMARS. Sorry, I was using the Spanish pronunciation.
say this himself, is the thing that people in the United States, from talking to people there, are most concerned about is any sort of boots on the ground scenario. They do not want American soldiers in the Middle East. I think they're right not to. I genuinely think that. And so fundamentally, it really depends on what happens and the way that it happens. And you're right, it is a big decision. But I think it's, all this stuff, I mean, Dave's calling for President Trump.
People that say no boots on the ground or blah, blah, blah are retarded. Are Americans right not to want war in the Middle East? No, that's stupid. What if we found out tomorrow that Saudi Arabia actually has 400 gas-filled chemical weapons aimed at every single country in the world? Should we go to war with Saudi Arabia and boots on the ground and blow all of it up? Probably, right? What we don't want is a stupid war or war with a lack of justification or clear objectives. Like this weird blanket ban of like, no, we can't war with anybody ever. No, I can't. Is retarded. It's stupid, okay? It's such a dumb, childlike take. It's so stupid.
To be impeached over this, when this is something that he promised the American people 30 to 40 times on the campaign.
Well, on that, I would clarify that. He said that number of times that Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear bomb. That is indisputable. He also has consistently portrayed himself.
I've also never heard, maybe they'll have it in the next 45 minutes here, why has nobody had the conversation about would the world be better off or worse if Iran had nuclear weapons? Can we have that conversation? Because if the answer is we'd be worse off, well, careful. Now you're on the road. Not you haven't quite arrived yet, but you're on the road to the Israeli-U.S. answer, which is, okay, well, bomb them until they lose them then. But I feel like the conversation should start there. Because if there is no issue with Iran having nuclear weapons, well, then we don't have to talk about anything else. The answer is obviously, it's wrong to bomb or attack them at all for this. Then you shouldn't interfere in any way, size, shape, or form. But if it is wrong, then you go to the next stage.
As a man who wants peace, not war, I'm going to solve the problem in Ukraine, solve the Middle East, and so on. This would go against all of his claims to be that person. And of course, the big debate behind all this is that Tulsi Gabbard, his own director of national intelligence, the IAEA director last night, they both said in very recent times, including 24 hours ago, in the case of the Atomic Agency, that there is no evidence that they've seen that Iran is anywhere near progressing to an actual nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key point of this.
So I like Tulsi Gabbard. We've had her on Trigonometry. I think she's a great human being, which is why I did her the courtesy of watching the full clip of her testimony that she gave. And what she says in that testimony is that Iran is not pursuing the nuclear weapons program. But what Iran is doing is...
Stealing my talking points again. Okay.
Enriching uranium to 60% and beyond, which is a clear indication of their desire either to actually make nuclear weapons or to move much, much closer to a position to be able to make them. As I think Dave would concede from all the nuclear scientists, what they're saying is you need about 3 to 5% enriched uranium for civilian purposes. They are now enriching uranium to 60%. And by the way, this is also in the IAEA report, and no one's talking about this. They're using their 20% uranium to make 60% uranium, which is again an indicator of the fact that they're moving either towards attempting to make nuclear weapons at some point or to be in the position to do so. And that is the threat. And there is no other reason for them to be doing that. So yes, they don't have the exact bomb ready to go, but they're moving in that direction. And Israel is in a position to deal with that threat for the first time in a very long time. And I understand why they're doing it.
Okay, Dave, before we get to your response to that, just explain to people why you have called what Donald Trump is doing a betrayal and why you think he should be impeached.
Well, I think he has brought us into a war with Iran. Now, how much this war...
Okay. New game. Every time he brings up a quote from a guy in the CIA, okay? I don't even know if we'll get it. Or Iraq, all right?
escalates, we will see. And I think that this is it is the most profoundly risky and reckless policy he could have pursued, or just about. I think this is very likely going to lead to a catastrophe, much like all of the other terror wars, including the one, Piers, that you heroically led the opposition in the UK to in 2003, of course, referring to the war in Iraq.
I cummed once, one cum. All right, let's go. Let's go for 5 cums by the end of the sentence, okay? All right.
And as you remember well, Piers, from that war, the justifications just kept constantly changing. And then when one fell away, they'd move to the next one. Oh, he was in on 9/11. Okay, he wasn't in on 9/11, but he's got weapons of mass destruction. Okay, he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, but we have to liberate the people or bring democracy. And I've already seen that it's remarkable how sped up it is. I've already seen so many of the war hawks bouncing back and forth between all of these different justifications. But of course, in the end there, all of the justifications failed. Not only did he not have weapons of mass destruction, not only was he not in on 9/11, but we also didn't liberate the people. The worst thing that ever happened to the people of Iraq was George W. Bush's war there. And as far as Iran enriching up to...
Wait, do we get to come over and over again when he brings up Iraq over and over again? Or do we have to go like... Because I feel like I would have come like 6 times already. I don't know.
To 60%. Yes, it's true that they only need, I think, between 3 to 5% for civilian nuclear purposes and maybe something like around 20 to 25% for some medical needs. But that is...
What are the medical needs? What? I haven't heard that before. Base, though.
What is known as a latent nuclear deterrent. There is another reason why they would have that. They want to demonstrate that they can get the bomb, but they don't have it right now to stop something like this happening. But the bottom line is that since 2007, our CIA has said they're
I come again.
they don't have nuclear weapons, and they're not striving to achieve them. Tulsi Gabbard, not only in her testimony, but in the Director of National Intelligence as her capacity serving that role, in the annual threat assessment just put out a couple months ago, reaffirmed the same thing. And so is the global community. Iran has been willing to negotiate this entire time. And maybe the negotiations haven't been successful, but even Benjamin Netanyahu, in his interview with Brett Baer the other day, couldn't even manage to lie and say that they've broken out and they're pursuing. He said maybe a year. The same thing he's been saying since I was 7 years old, lying over and over and over again because he wants a regime change war here. And he's said this in his own words, and so have all of the neoconservatives. Look, right here on your show, Piers, which I think might be the most fascinating moment in the history of Uncensored, when General Wesley Clark reaffirmed that not only had he seen the plans to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years, but that it went all the way back to the early 90s. And
What was this called again? I need to be more familiar with this. With the clean break or clear break. This is one of the best neo-Nazi talking points. Was it this one? Clean break memo? Showing that Israel wants us to destroy... What are the 7 countries? There's like countries listening. It's like, look, Israel's gotten us to go after all of them. Ugh.
And that it was revived, in his words, in a study paid for by the Israelis. They've gotten the 6 other ones. This is the 7th one.
Yes.
This war is not about nukes that Iran doesn't have. And just one more point I would make, as the great Scott Horton said the other day. Look, I mean, even if they were developing nukes, which they're not, Truman knew that the Soviets were developing nukes. He didn't launch an aggressive war against them for it. And Johnson knew that Mao Zedong was developing nukes. He still didn't launch an aggressive war against the country.
Why? You should always be very suspect when people are eager to compare totally different situations to each other. Not to say that, I mean, you can compare things, but the world is a much different place now than it was in the, 1950s. Or the world's a much different place now, or the relationships between countries. Comparisons are fine, but I feel like you need to justify these a little bit more. But
And the point is that you could sit here and say, just like they did with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, you could sit here and say, no, we're just going to have a no-fly zone. We won't have boots on the ground. We won't have this. Look, Iran has already demonstrated, in a few days that this war has been going on, that they're more capable than all of the other countries we picked on in the terror wars. They've already hit Israel and killed people there. What's going to happen when a few Americans get killed? Hopefully this doesn't, but what's going to happen if that happens? What do you think Donald Trump's going to do?
Many of us carry around bulky, worn-out wallets that are uncomfortable and full of junk. The big question is why. Ridge wallets can hold 12 cards plus cash with 0 bulk. They're made from premium materials like aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber. And they're built with RFID blocking technology to defend your cards against digital theft. Suitcase by you purchase it and ask you where you heard about them. So please support our show and tell them I sent you. I think that is an amazingly big question. Constantine, your response to that?
Well, it's fascinating. So the Iranians are willing to negotiate, but the negotiations aren't going anywhere. That's a very strange way of looking at it. Look, there's so much to address there, Piers. First of all, you've got to think about this and understand this from an Israeli perspective in the situation. A lot of people think that Israel has just launched the war in Iran. That's not how Israel sees it at all. Israel has been at war with Iran since October the 7th, when an Iranian proxy, Hamas, attacked them. On October the 8th, an Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, began to fire rockets into Israel. Then the Houthis, another Iranian proxy, began to attack shipping and also Israel, right? Now, what has happened since then is Israel has eliminated those threats to, I was going to say deballed, but decapitated Hezbollah. They dealt with the threat of Hamas, and they are now in a position to deal with the threat they've always been concerned about. Now, why is Israel so concerned about this? Well, first of all, Iran has been saying for a very long time, they don't want regime change in Israel. They want the state of Israel not to exist. Now, think about the fact that in the post-October 7 world, they cannot take the risk that they're only enriching uranium to 60.
Is your position that you don't want Iran to have nukes? If so, can you explain why? Because Iran is a shitty country that does a whole bunch of really shitty things in the region. Nobody likes them, okay? Nobody's friends with Iran, except for like Russia, okay? Everybody hates them. They support a whole bunch of dog shit groups to do a bunch of bad things, all right? So fuck them. No, I don't think Iran should have nuclear weapons. I think it literally just degrades the situation for everybody. It makes everybody worse. I feel like it feels kind of silly to even have to debate that point to where are we, like, who's defending Iran having nuclear weapons? This is such that just feels wacky to me. But
that in the post-October 7 world, they cannot take the risk that they're only enriching uranium to 60% because they want to threaten to have nuclear weapons. That is not something they can do. And by the way, Piers, there's something that people don't seem to understand about. We struggle in the West. I really do think we all struggle in the West to understand the fundamentalist mindset. And let me give you an example of what the regime in Iran is like so that we can all understand what the threat here is. After the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran in 79, the war broke out between Iran and Iraq. And in that war, Iran was at a disadvantage. It was militarily backward. It wasn't financially able to deal with that. And you know what they did? They attempted to mitigate that by recruiting as many child soldiers as they could. We don't know how many because they didn't bother to count, but it's hundreds of thousands. And because some of them were too young and too weak to fight, they didn't send them to the front line. They sent them to sweep minefields with their own bodies. That is what this regime does. Now, if those people are willing to do that to their own children, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, what do you think they would do to the children of their enemies if they get a nuclear weapon or if they get close to it, or if they're allowed to continue funding proxies around the Middle East in order to attack Israel as they've already done?
Dave Smith.
Okay, can I respond to some of this, Piers? Because
wait,
does. Now, if
did he get Zionist pilled or whatever? He's not. He's actually. It doesn't sound like the full Israeli second thing, which is good.
Due to the children.
Oh my God, I had dude, I hate my life. I don't think this person watching this. Okay, I have a real life friend who very, very, very cool person. Okay, but her and her brother travel a ton, do a lot of cool things. These are super cool people. I really value these people as friends. But when the Israel-Palestine thing happened, they were on a very, very, very different side than I was. And so I would argue with these people a lot. But it was friendly. It was fine. At least they're like Hispanic people too, so it's like we can scream at each other and everything, and it's cool. But we were on very, very different sides of it. They both thought that I was way too much on the Israeli side, and it was like, whatever. And then they, a while ago, took a big trip to Israel, where they, like watching other stories, and they're saying like they had like a big perspective change. And watching their stories and then like clicking through and seeing the people talking to them, like, oh no, this is the actual like the Brianna Wu tour. and then I'm like messaging like, hey, hold on, like I know that like Hamas is crazy and stuff, but you got to understand like when Israelis are saying like Gaza can be beautiful on its own, that's actually like a really shitty thing that they're trying to do to Palestinians to deprive them of a country by saying that they can be good enough here. And now we're like have like changed. Oh God, dude. I wish that these guys would all just nuke each other. I think Iran should have a nuclear weapon. I changed my mind. Because the sooner they get a nuclear weapon, the sooner we can all stop talking about this fucking region, okay? God damn. Not Saturday? No, this is offline, friend. Jesus.
Children of their enemies if they get a nuclear weapon or if they get close to it, or if they're allowed to continue funding proxies around the Middle East in order to attack Israel as they've already done.
Dave Smith.
Okay, can I respond to some of this, Piers? Because as I always insist when I come on your show, ironically, I get called a moral relativist when I criticize Israel, but I'm the one who's always asking for an objective standard here that we can judge all sides on. Because it's just, you can just focus on the horrible things that Iran did in the 1980 war with Iraq, which Saddam Hussein launched, and the U.S. backed Saddam Hussein as he was using chemical weapons. And
so that justifies using children to walk into minefields?
No, that is not what I'm saying.
Okay,
let
so
me
what
finish my point here. Instead of just strawmanning, well, I was about to say, so let me finish it. Okay, by the way, Israel never killed any children, as you know, Piers, right? They have the most.
Israel is not sending its own children into minefields. It's a massive difference.
Okay, Constantine, let me finish my point, and then you can respond to it and see if you can take it on. Now, when you sit here and say that they've been at war with Iran since October 7th because Hamas is their proxies, what exactly, proxy means that I would think you have operational control over them or something like that.
Well,
you have operational control. I'm pretty sure members of the Iranian military were like literally working with people in Hamas to do the training for the October 7th attacks. I think that's who they killed in the consulate in Syria, was the accusation. Well, now that's if you believe those pesky Zionists.
Okay. Let me explain what I think that means, because I've been arguing that point in terms of understanding where Israel comes from on this, which is there can be no doubt, I don't think, Dave, you would cast doubt on this, that Iran has financially and militarily given active and sustained support for a number of years to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, and to Hamas. I mean, you wouldn't dispute that.
Right. So, Piers, then by your logic and...
Oh, my God. Oh, I'm ready. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Fuck. This is the electrostim prostate orgasm. He's going for the triple here. By that logic, is America the largest terrorist state? Please, God. Oh, my God. Hold on. My balls are so blue right now. He's about to do that one. He's about to pull out that one. Isn't America the biggest terrorist state? Maybe. We'll see.
The Houthis and to Hamas. I mean, you wouldn't dispute that.
Right. So, Piers, then by your logic and Constantine's logic, is Israel our proxy?
Yeah, I calmed. It's all over. Can you see it? There it goes. It's great. Yes. Now bring up Iraq or the CIA again. They're so boring. These conversations are so boring. We're 25 minutes in. Constantine is at least able to have the conversation. Can we have like a real conversation about anything? It's actually so boring.
Just attacked Iran.
Well, I would say that Israel is actually, you could well argue, given the amount of support that America gives Israel militarily and economically.
Like, you're not making a good point, you fucking retard. America openly gives billions of dollars to Israel. Nobody's denying that. You're not making it. This is not a good point. Wait, well, if that's the case, then, would you say that Israel is actually doing things that align with the interests of America and is being funded by America? Yeah, it's in our fucking budget, you retard. No shit, Sherlock fucking Holmes. Who assigned Detective Dipshit here to the fucking international investigation of open State Department messaging and U.S. foreign assistance budgets that are all open to the public? No shit, Sherlock fucking Holmes. What are you talking about?
Economically, yes. I think
fine.
One person's ally is
Okay, fine. But then shouldn't we nuke America? Shouldn't we nuke ourselves?
Yes, can I make some points on this?
I need a cum button. Somebody needs to give me a cum soundboard.
And hold on, let me just...
Yeah, so I think ally proxy...
Can I flesh out your... Dave, I'm very happy to hear a counter-argument. Can I just flesh out Piers' point a little bit, if that's okay? So
Sure.
Here's what we know. According to the State Department's own figures, Iran gives Hamas about $100 million a year. Latest figures. They've been funding Hamas since the early 1990s. Yahya Sinwar said in 2017 that Iran is the single biggest military and financial backer of Hamas's military wing. In September 2023, a month before October the 7th, 500 Hamas fighters and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters were being trained by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard abroad. I can't remember if it's in Lebanon or in Iran proper. And there are numerous chronicled, documented meetings between senior
Oof, he knows more about this than I do.
commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hamas and Hezbollah fighters in the lead up to it. What do you think they were doing?
No. Don't talk about that. Oh my God, I just thought of the best. I'm sorry, one more cum. I'm so sorry, we're coming so much today. This will be the last cum of the day. Please, God, the ultimate cum alley-oop here would be, well, if you think that Iran training those people are bad, what about when the USA trained Osama bin Laden personally in Langley, when Osama bin Laden got trained by the USA and then did 9/11 on us? Oh my God, if we could work that in, God, it would be so great. Just whatever you don't ever address the point, but just keep working in whatever you can about the US. Please, God. Oh my God, please.
About world peace and swapping hummus recipes. This is something that they've been involved in very heavily, and they continue to be involved in.
Please.
And Hamas and Hezbollah are the sword hanging over Israel's neck that Iran has used in order to prevent the very thing that's happening now.
Hey?
Okay, so to be clear here, it's an outrage that...
To be clear, when he says to be clear, what he's trying to do is he's going to take that argument in a generalized form, he's going to extract it, and then he's going to try to apply it to the US. And it's going to be Osama bin Laden. Please, God, let it be Osama bin Laden. Please.
Iran has sold weapons and given money to Hamas, and therefore Hamas is their proxy. Yet, as we all know, Piers, and me and you have discussed this,
It's going to be, please be Al-Qaeda. Oh my God, please.
2 weeks before October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu sends the head of Mossad
The Qatar stuff, money?
to Qatar to make sure that the funding to Hamas continues. Yet, is Hamas now a proxy of Israel? Is Israel at war with itself?
Well,
Hamas was the government of the Gaza Strip, Dave. Like, they need to have some kind of money to run the Gaza Strip. I don't know if Iran was training Hamas soldiers to better facilitate the area in an administrative sense, but okay.
Listen, I think on that point, I certainly think that Benjamin Netanyahu,
Yes, please, whatever you can, keep avoiding the point. Yes.
when this is all over, is going to have a monumental day of
Notice how Dave Smith hasn't actually given a response to literally fucking anything. It's always these, like, this is whataboutism. Okay, true whataboutism.
Not just in the corruption courts, but I think he's going to have a monumental day of reckoning about how he allowed this to happen on his watch, how Mossad so spectacularly dropped the ball. No one can give me a good explanation for why they can carry out this kind of attack on Hezbollah with the pages and carry out so precise an attack in Iran, but didn't apparently know that Hamas was spending 20 years building a tunnel system and didn't know 3,000 of them were about to pour over the border. I will never defend Netanyahu in this. I think he's going to be a busted flush. I suspect he sees this attack on Iran as being a chance.
What are these bonger? A busted flush? What does that mean? Is that a poker analogy? What does that mean?
To avoid being a busted flush for a little longer than it might
Why did he said it again?
be the case. But there's going to be a day of reckoning for him, and the fact that he actively encouraged billions of dollars to be funneled to Hamas to create a divide and rule strategy between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority has also turned out to be one of the most catastrophically...
They're already divided, though. They're divided. Yes, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are two separate things, and they very clearly don't work well together. They've tried to in the past, and they both... In 2005, they kind of tried to coup Hamas, and then it was in 2013, Hamas tried to re-coup in the West Bank, the PLO and Palestinian Authority. These guys don't get along with each other. Now, did Netanyahu help? No. And does he like to see them divided? Of course, Israel loves to see them divided. But it's not just because of Netanyahu. He's not that strong. I know we like to think that Jews can mastermind everything, but...
wrong things that an Israeli leader could possibly have done. So, look, that's where I sit with Netanyahu.
None of this makes Hamas an Israel proxy, right?
Okay, fine. Well, yeah, I mean, it did kind of by the
They're not
definition
the
you guys
primary
gave me, but
source
the
of their
point-
funding or
listen-
support.
Okay, fine. Okay, it's got to be primary. Just being... Yeah, I mean, it did kind of by the
They're not
definition
the
you guys gave me,
primary
but the
source of
point-
their funding or
listen-
support.
Oh.
Okay, fine. Okay, it's got to be primary. Just being... Okay, fine. Whatever. Anyway, the point is that...
Oh! That was a bad point by Constantine. He said it had to be primary. The number that Constantine cited was $100 million of support. There was way more than just $100 million of Qatari money that went to the Gaza Strip, wasn't it? I thought this was on the magnitude of billions or tens of billions. Hold on. How much money Qatar to Hamas? $1.8 billion? Okay. Well, over how many years, though? But over the years, like over a decade, or... Well, regardless, even if it was over a decade. But Dave Dipshit doesn't even know the fucking numbers, so he can't counter Constantine's. He just has to accept it. Okay, good one.
This, right? Obviously, right now, Israel has taken out much of the Hezbollah leadership. The Houthis have been bombed. I think there's still a bit of a problem for them. They've been absolutely leveling Gaza. And so they think this is the moment. And of course, Bashar al-Assad fell as well. So now they think this is the moment for regime change in Iran. It's the same reason why people like Ben Shapiro were celebrating when Bashar al-Assad fell. Now the Shiite crescent is no longer supplying weapons from Iran to Hezbollah. But I'm not an Israeli. I'm an American. I'm not cheering when the emir of al-Qaeda takes over in Syria. And listen, whatever you put the risk at here, which if this thing keeps escalating...
The emir of al-Qaeda? Did you know that if you were ever associated with any of these groups, you are 100% aligned with everything that group ever wanted to do 20 years ago? Yes, true. Intelligent.
The risk of this going to a real ground war, another war in the war on terrorism, let me be very clear when I say this. I don't know that America will survive this. We went into the terror wars in a much stronger place than we're going into this one, and this is a much tougher opponent than Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi. We didn't go into the terror wars...
This is not the war on terror. It would be a war on Iran, okay? And about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. This is not a war. This is not a war on terror or a general broad vague war against another fucking noun.
$37 trillion in debt. We didn't go into the terror wars with the cultural and political and racial divides. We have mass protests in the streets right now over Donald Trump trying to enforce his immigration policy. This is
really? That's it? It's just over him trying to enforce immigration policy? Oh, okay. Thanks, Dave.
Going to be, this has the potential to be an utter disaster. And why should any American or British person for that matter, why should any of us support this war? Because Israel thinks it's in their interest. Israel has attacked...
Well, I would argue, I would argue it's not just in Israel's interest. I think Iran is an evil regime that oppresses its people, that has funded terrorism.
So was Saddam Hussein.
Well, yeah, I agree. But in Saddam Hussein's case, I never believed...
Saddam Hussein never funded terrorism.
Well, I never believed that Saddam Hussein had no human being.
I don't think Saddam Hussein would ever fund terrorists. He was the terrorist. Those other terrorists would be a threat to Saddam. No, that would be my understanding.
There was no terrorism in Iraq until we got rid of Saddam, actually.
Tax day has passed, but for millions of Americans, that's where the trouble begins. The act of
Make that point.
not the IRS.
No. I'm sorry. Just to be clear, I said that before I heard Piers Morgan make that point. I was saying about being a brutally oppressive, dictator.
I think you can't hold any truck for this Iranian regime. I think a lot of Iranian people would agree with that. I think they would love to get rid of them. I think that Israel has every right to feel threatened by Iran's tentacles in the way they supported 3 different terror groups right on their border.
Yeah,
so I'm not saying that you're not right, that this might all backfire.
Let me just ask you,
I'm not saying it may not backfire. I'm just saying I do understand why Israel has decided to do it now. I think they sense that Iran's regime has never been weaker because of what's happened in Syria, because of what happened to Hezbollah. what's been the most significant moment of the last week? Probably Hezbollah saying we're not getting involved in this, right? So, I mean, that to me was a very significant moment. And that may well have emboldened not just Israel to continue pummeling Iran, but also may have emboldened Trump to think, well, actually, if we're ever going to deal with this regime, now is the moment. Now, that's not to say, Dave, that you're not right, that this could all backfire horrendously. And if America gets sucked into a ground war, then it will be a complete nightmare. I've got no doubt about that.
Yes, but would you also concede, would you concede though, that if you allow Iran to enrich uranium, that also could backfire?
Yes, right? I was about to say that. And also I was about to say that Russia is now making pretty worrying noises that if America gets involved, it's not going to tolerate it. So you can't even...
Yeah, Russia can't even deal with fucking Ukrainian drones right now, with the $50 Walmart drones. What is Russia going to do?
All that, given what's happening in Ukraine. But yeah, I think in your point, Constantine, yes, when I saw that IAE report, I read it and I thought they'd gone from 3% to 60% uranium enrichment. And there's only one reason you would do that. Either you take Dave's view, which is they're doing that because they want to have a form of nuclear deterrent without actually having a bomb. Or if you're Israel, you're like, these people have been funding terrorism against us for decades. And now they've gone from 3% to 60%, way more than is needed for any civilian use. Clearly, they are on a fast track here to be a nuclear power. And we cannot allow that to happen. So I do, well, let Constantine respond first.
But Piers, what about Al-Qaeda?
That's why I do understand
let's be honest.
why Israel feels the way it does.
Well, exactly. And let's be honest about something here, Piers. The three of us are sitting in comfortable air-conditioned studios on the other side of the world from the region where this is happening. We have the luxury to pontificate about the real reason that Iran is enriching uranium to near weapons grade. Israel does not have the ability to get this wrong and then go, well, I apologize, I got this one wrong, as Dave has done with President Trump. He supported him being elected, and now he's going, I got it wrong, guys, let's impeach him. Israel, if it gets this wrong, gets annihilated. They do not have the luxury of that.
Do you think the U.S. should be intervening in Iran's nuclear enrichment program? Like if you're in a scenario where we're looking at things in a vacuum, yeah, I would support it 100%. Stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons, I think at almost all costs, I think would be good. I think I would still support it under Trump, but the risk is much higher because Trump is so fucking stupid that the chances of things going wrong or us getting into a worse conflict or a protracted conflict is probably higher because Trump is an actual retard. But I think that Iran having nuclear weapons, I think would just be very, very, very bad. I think we should do basically almost anything we could to prevent that from happening.
And now he's going, I got it wrong, guys. Let's impeach him. Israel, if it gets this wrong, gets annihilated. They do not have the luxury of that. Now, Dave, I think the point you make about the American people, I have the greatest respect for the American people, and they should determine the course of America themselves. They've elected Donald Trump, and that is the reality. No one here, Piers found out, I think, with some history, that Americans don't like being told what to do by foreigners. And I'm certainly not going to do that. It's up to the American people. I know the American people don't want boots on the ground, and neither do I. And neither do sensible people, I think. I think the extent of Americans' involvement should be so help Israel defend itself against the missile attacks and let them get the job done themselves. I agree with you. This is Israel's war. They should prosecute it to the best of their ability, and they should deal with the threat that they face from Iran. I don't want a massive involvement of the West. I don't think that's what we need. And by the way, Piers, just one quick point, slightly tangential, but not necessarily important. For those people who care about what's happening in Ukraine, this is brilliant for Ukraine because Iran has been one of the biggest suppliers of drones, the suicide drones that have been raining down in Ukrainian cities and killing civilians and military personnel there. The fact that Iran and Russia are now having to deal with this situation takes a lot of pressure off Ukraine, and is good for that reason as well.
All right, Dave, the one thing I would quibble with about what you said earlier was about the way that Iran has responded. They always threaten annihilation when they get attacked, right? Or when they're involved in any kind of skirmish. We've heard it towards the end of last year and nothing really happened. We've heard it again now. And although, yes, they've got through.
Do you think that ending Iran's nuclear weapons program is Israel's true/main goal right now? Yes. Or is it regime change? Yes. Or do they view those as the same thing? Here, if you want to understand, in my opinion, this is the history of Israel versus the Arabs and Iran, okay? This is what it is, okay? Politically, this is sometimes what Israel is forced to accept, okay? This will be the position they have, okay? And then, if they're really lucky, this is what they get to have, all right? This is like the money, all right? I should switch these, I guess, because Israel will say this word, but like, so sometimes Israel will accept shit that they don't really want to accept, but they have to be politically viable for, you know, Western people and for their own population. Because as much as people like to shit on Israel, they are a democracy. They do host their own criticism, and Israel does have a thriving, blossoming left in that country, although they might not be as dovish as people in other countries are. The issue is that for the history of this region, it's basically always been Israel saying, like, we're going to, like, this is our position, we're going to be here, and, like, if we get real fucked, we're going to have to come over here, but if you give us a fucking reason, we'll go all the way over here. And then the Arabs are like, I'll give you a fucking reason. And this is the whole history of the region. It's this, Israel was able to take the entire Sinai Peninsula in 67. You know, we talk about the Golan Heights, we talk about the West Bank, we talk about the Gaza Strip. They had the whole Sinai Peninsula. And then they were forced to give it back because Sadat made such aggressive overtures towards peace, the Egyptian leader, that I think Israel kind of had to respond. And it was like a nightmare scenario. It's like, oh God, an Arab leader that's like super actually big on trying to force it. And so Israel's like, fuck, okay, fine, fuck it. You have the Sinai back, whatever, I don't care. And so they have to do this, right? But then in other circumstances, it's like, you need to start giving the West Bank back to, you know, Palestinians. You need to start giving the Gaza Strip to Palestinians. You have a two-state solution, right? But then you have people like Arafat who are like, violence is also always cool, though, as well as suicide bombing and all sorts of other shit. And so it's just like, oh, well, look, we're not safe. We got to kill these people. Sorry, we're not safe. We can't give them shit. What, you want us to leave Lebanon? Okay, fine. Oh, look, there's Hezbollah. You want us to disengage from Gaza? Fine. We do. Oh, look, there's Hamas. You want us to, like, every time Israel does anything, the Arab states or Iran are always right here to give them an excuse. And then, right, like even Hamas now, right? Oh, we still have the hostages. Like, imagine Hamas releases. Imagine how cucked Israel would be if Hamas would have released all the hostages on, like, you know, day 14 or something, right? 2 or 3 weeks in, Hamas just dumps all the hostages. Like, oh, fuck it, there you go. Oof. Israel's in a really rough spot at that point. Arabs have gotten better at propaganda. Hamas, I think, is really good at propaganda, but they, for whatever reason, still don't do politics well. And I think one of the people talk about the military might of Israel. I don't know if it's because so many came from Europe and they had the military training and all that, you know, coming from Europe and going to the Middle East. But the political mind and the politicking that Jews and Israelis could do was also just so much better than what Arabs could do. And for whatever reason, historically, Arabs, at least until the 70s, just didn't have the mind for politics that Israelis did. And that's just been a huge issue that they've had for so long. But in my opinion, for a very brief macro, like, this has always been the problem, because right now, so I'm sorry, so to bring this back, you asked me, does Israel just want to get rid of the nuclear reactor stuff, or do they want to get rid of the regime? The position that Israel will have is here, where really, like, okay, well, we're going after the nukes, which is probably defensible, you know? But if Iran keeps hiding shit, and Iran says, we're going to do whatever the fuck we want, and we're going to keep bombing you or whatever, now you're dangerously close to it, you know, where Israel's like, I mean, you know, what are we going to do? You know, if Iran wants to keep, you know, pushing the boundaries of everything, and, you know, if Iran wants to, you know, say they're hiding nukes and they're going to keep bombing us, and they just bombed a hospital, and, you know, maybe regime change. Maybe it's not that bad of an idea. Maybe regime change needs to happen. Maybe they do need a different leader, and the Ayatollah's kind of shitty, and he funds all these terrorist groups, and maybe they'll nuke the United States, and who knows? And I feel like that's just, it's over and over and over again. It's always this. So that's my answer. Okay.
The Iron Dome several times. They've killed some civilians in Tel Aviv. This is indisputable. So they technically have done better in terms of their revenge attack.
Does Israel really care about public opinion, though? What is really stopping them from doing? Yes, they do, because Israel is a democracy. For as much as the lefties in the West and the white people want to fool you, Israel is a democracy. They have to respond to democratic pressure, and that's what they do. You can very clearly see the winds changing, and you can very clearly see different leadership emerge in Israel in response to different events, because they're a democracy and they have to respond to democratic pressure. So
civilians we've heard it when they get attacked, right? Or when they're involved in any kind of skirmish. We've heard it towards the end of last year and nothing really happened. We've heard it again now. And although, yes, they've got through the Iron Dome several times, they've killed some civilians in Tel Aviv. This is indisputable. So they technically have done better in terms of their revenge attack than other countries have fared against Israel. I accept that. But I also think we are far removed from seeing any kind of huge resistance coming out of Iran. In fact, what you're seeing is their bluff potentially getting called here, that a lot of it has been rhetoric built on sand, literally, and that they don't actually have the military capability to even tackle a country 1/10 its size.
Can you know why Israel literally bombed Tunisia, whose president was very openly pro-two-state, so much so that he got booed and denigrated in Khartoum when he proposed it to the Arab summit after the 6th war. This one event blackpilled my entire country on Israel-Palestine. I can't really argue against it. Are you Tunisian? Why did they bomb Tunisia? Did they bomb Tunisia, or was it like an assassination attempt at Tunisia? I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look it up.
In terms of population, let alone if the United States was to get involved. So I think what you're seeing is actually the opposite of the way you characterized it. I don't think you're seeing a massive response from Iran. I think you're seeing as good as they can do, and it's not very much.
Well, look, I mean, this is what remains to be seen, and we don't know. But in 2007, when Dick Cheney was trying to push George W. Bush into war with Iran, it was...
Oh, sorry. Well, that's we're getting to it, right?
Pentagon who stopped George W. Bush from doing it. And it was them who said that we do not have escalation dominance over Iran, essentially meaning that we have, we still have thousands of troops in Iraq right now. We have bases and embassies all throughout the region that they can touch. Now, we'll see, I guess, Piers. I guess we're going to play this game. I guess we're going to play this incredibly risky game.
I agree, it's high risk.
For no reason, essentially, from the United States of America's interests. And, look, this stuff, I'm sorry, I just find this to be too ridiculous. All of the intelligence is saying that they don't have nuclear weapons and they're not pursuing nuclear weapons. There is
this is just nothing. There's no conversation here. All of these shows should start with, is the region better off or not with Iran having a nuclear weapon or having access to nuclear weapons? That's where all these conversations should start. And all this random harkening back to fucking, should the U.S. have, gone to war with the Soviets when they were researching nuclear bombs, or Iran, Iraq? Like, it should just start here and then go from there. But it's just so boring.
There's one country, one government in the Middle East that is not a member of the non-proliferation treaties that has nuclear weapons secretly, and it ain't Iran. It's Israel. It is so ridiculous.
Well, I agree. It's absurd, as you know. I agree. I agree. I don't understand how Israel is allowed to continue pretending they don't have nuclear weapons.
But what are you saying? Are you saying Iran should develop nuclear weapons to compensate for that reality? Or
No. What I'm saying.
He's not saying anything. He's just gonna please bring up Al Qaeda again.
Is this okay?
Sorry,
whenever you guys talk about this, even already, and Piers, I got to say, I thought you were a little bit guilty of this right after October 7th, understandably, perhaps so. But even right now, whenever we talk, it's all about the Israeli perspective, as if we're all Israelis. Oh, Israel can't take the risk that they have 60% enrichment. Israel can't get this wrong the way I could change my mind about supporting Donald Trump. I guess Israel can get it wrong when they lure America into a war, when they pump out propaganda saying that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. That's okay when they get that one wrong, but they can't get this one wrong. Okay, fine.
Why are you blaming Israel for that? It was your
Unreal. Yeah, how really we're that retarded? We're that stupid? This is my childlike argument against neo-Nazis, is when the neo-Nazi talking points come up that Jews literally control everything. I'm like, okay, well, fucking, if Jews are that smart and we're that stupid, then maybe they should be in control. Like, I'll live in the Jewish empire. Fuck it. If my race of people is so doomed to be of such a lower intellectual phenotype that Jews can just control us so well, then fucking let me just live in the Jewish haven. I'll live like the people that paid a jizya or whatever in the caliphates or whatever. Just let me live in my little white kibbutzim while Jews run my shit, okay?
Your own government lying to us about that. I was protesting against the war in Iraq exactly the same way you and Piers.
I think we all oppose
But it was our government lying to us. It wasn't about Israel. Why is everything that happens in the world the fault of Israel then?
Yeah.
This is such a blatant straw man. I didn't say everything in the world is the fault of Israel.
Notice how he fixates on that instead of what Constantine was clearly getting at is our government did lie to us about this intentionally. I don't know why. Somebody asked that in chat. That's the one thing. When we get to Iraq, we'll learn that eventually. I do not know why the United States went to war with Iraq. And I'm not talking about like weapons of mass. I don't know what the internal reason was of the motive. I actually don't know the answer. I have no fucking idea why. But
Israel, I'm saying they were also guilty of this.
But why are you putting the emphasis on them when George W. Bush and Tony Blair were using their bully pulpits to make this point to a far wider audience than some guy in the Middle East called Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yep.
If you think that I am removing any of the blame from George W. Bush or Tony Blair, I assure you you're wrong, and you don't know what you're talking about. I've been blasting them for years. They're war criminals who should be in the Hague.
I agree.
That is not the issue. We are talking specifically about the nation of Israel right now, so I'm talking about their responsibility. And why is it, by the way, that this is always a one-way street? I hear all the hawks.
Jews don't have jizya. Well, the Muslims do. It was a joke. Fuck you.
Constantly being like, Iran said this, Iran threatened this. What about the threats in the other direction? Maybe Iran feels like they don't have a choice. So look, Muammar Gaddafi, Iran.
Like, you could be of both positions, right? Which I know is like inconceivable to a lot of people because it literally has to be one side or another. And I said this before, especially for the origination of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you can be in the same mind. I don't know if you say of two minds because that implies two. You could be of the position where I think I fully empathize with the early Jews migrating to the Levant and to Palestine and fighting for Israel. I totally get that. I understand that. Such that I would even say they're morally justified for it. I totally get it, 100%. But I also understand the reluctance of the local Arab population to see that they were going to lose a state to what they essentially saw as being European invaders. I totally understand that as well. And I think I could get their ability to fight here too. It doesn't have to be, and unfortunately, especially when you're talking about competing nations, there's not always a good guy or a bad guy or a clear right or a clear wrong. It could be that Israel, from their perspective, is fully justified in attacking Iran because a nuclear weapon does represent a threat to them. And it could be from Iran's perspective that they're fully justified in pursuing a nuclear weapon because they feel like they have no more leverage in the region. As Iraq has fallen, as Syria has fallen, as Russia is falling over itself, maybe they feel like that's the only option they have. You could be of the mind that both of these sides have their own justifications for doing what they're doing. And then the question is, well, which side do you side with? And you have to pick one. Well, you don't have to. You could just, no, you do have to pick one. But I guess we just have to say one side is fully in the right and one side is fully in the wrong, or
Iran is on the list of 7 countries that are supposed to be overthrown. The U.S. government went and overthrew both of their next door neighbors, invaded the countries and destroyed them after putting Iran on the axis of evil list when they had nothing to do with 9/11. And then when Muammar Gaddafi denuclearized, they went in there and overthrew him in the most violent, brutal way, was sodomized to death by a pack of madmen. Maybe Iran...
With the U.S. didn't do that, though. Those were local people. You should ask yourself why the people hated Gaddafi so much. But okay, I'm just... Now that, I mean, it's...
Iran also feels that they can't get this one wrong. Why are we doing this? This is a country that poses no threat to the United States of America. And if you guys want to try to hang on the fence here and go, hey, I'm not telling Americans what to do, I think Israel should do it on their own. But that's just a fantasy land. They're not doing it on their own. They're doing it with our weapons, with our intelligence support, with our money, with us protecting them from a retaliation strike.
Moving a level down or up from that, do you think successfully destroying Fordo or whatever would set Iran back more than a few months? I've seen conflicting things on that. Additional chance of a new regime being better for Israel B. I mean, destroying all their centrifuges and shit would definitely set them back. It would be very brutal for Iran to deal with. I would imagine they have to import a whole bunch of new shit and re-enrich a whole bunch of uranium, and that takes a lot of time starting from nothing. That would be a pretty big deal. But I mean, the best thing would be to have a type of negotiation. But Trump tore up the JCPOA, so we don't have that anymore. Trump has no ability to negotiate with anybody. Trump is one of the worst negotiators that I know of in recent U.S. history for negotiating anything. I don't know why he dares nicknames himself the negotiator in chief, or why any of the dick sucks that follow this guy around think he hasn't negotiated fucking anything. Still waiting on those trade deals, by the way. Still waiting on all those trade deals to be negotiated, by the way. What was it supposed to be? 90 and 90 days? How many days are we past when was Liberation Day? When was Liberation Day, United States? April, January, February, March, April, May, June. So what, we have 2 weeks? And then it's going to be what? Didn't he say that? Was it 90 deals in 90 days? Or was it more, 100 deals in 90 days? So when is that? We're coming up on that, right? So he tore up the nuclear. We are seeing as clear and direct a line as you will ever see is Trump does a bad, and now the whole world pays for it. It will never be a more direct line than this. We tore up the Iranian nuclear deal. 2 years later, they fell out of compliance with it. And now in this term, now Israel's bombing them because they have 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. So...
And, at least possibly, with our president using negotiations to dupe Iran into thinking that they weren't at risk. I mean, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu...
This stupid fucking meme of we just negotiated with them just to lure them into a false sense of security. What?
With our president using negotiations to dupe Iran into thinking that they weren't at risk. I mean, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu says, and that's what some other reporting says. Maybe that's not the case, but either way, he pretended like he was afterward. So no, none of this is being done without America. This is about a regime change war. All of them said it in their own words. They're on record. Do you guys think Benjamin Netanyahu has been mistaken for 30 years, claiming that Iran is a year to 3 years away from a nuke? Or was he lying?
There have been multiple attacks and attempts to delay Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon. In these 30 years, it's not like anybody's just sitting there watching them with no interference whatsoever, but...
Well, I think, listen, I think the reality is, the thing that struck me was going from 3% to 60% suggests an intent. It suggests an incontrovertible...
They're not the only country that does this.
But nobody disputes that Iran has gone from 3% to 60% in uranium enrichment, right? So that is all, unlike with Saddam and the WMD that didn't exist, that is...
Sorry, hold on. You guys are children. You're children. Because even if you were right, you were wrong, okay? Jesus Christ, at Destiny, you're blinding yourself with hatred, your hatred of Trump in the Middle East. Iran wasn't keeping the JCPOA at all, and they continued building the bomb. It was a good call to leave it, probably made by Pence. If they're violating the treaty, then you show the world that they're violating the treaty, and then you build a coalition, and you go in and you do something about it. This is the same stupid argument that Israelis and Palestinians go back and forth giving each other. Well, if we signed a deal with them, we don't think they'd accept it. Sign it! And then show them not accepting it. Sign a thing and then show them breaking it. And you have so much more international moral authority, legal authority, democratic authority. People will support you more than do that. You don't leave prematurely and go, oh, well, I don't think they were following anyway. Well, good. Go fuck yourself with a bayonet. You've accomplished nothing now. Now you have nothing.
It's just how you interpret.
It's such a stupid perspective on things. Oh, well, they weren't going to follow it anyway. They were already breaking. If they're breaking it, then build an international coalition to go do something about it. That's what being a leader is about. That's what having these deals is for. You don't just arbitrarily pull out of something and then start flying B-52s over the country 5 years later. It's oh, fuck us, I guess. Retard.
what they're intending to do with that. And let me ask you.
Can I just one quick thing on this? So first of all those regime wars you're talking about are the fault of the US and other Western governments who pursued them. That's who's responsible. That's who should be to blame, and as you say, should be prosecuted for that. But the reason people rightly call you a moral relativist, Dave, is that you don't seem to understand the difference between, yes, I think it's quite clear that Benjamin Netanyahu wants regime change in Iran, but that is not the same as the regime in Iran wanting to destroy Israel. There's a big difference. If the mullahs in Iran wanted a different prime minister of Israel, that is not the same as wanting to destroy their entire country. And the reason Israel is as paranoid about these things as it is, let's be honest, it's surrounded, or at least was until recently when opinion in many Arab countries changed towards Israel, thanks to President Trump's Abraham Accords. Israel was surrounded by many, many countries who don't believe that it has a right to exist. And that's the difference. And that's why people call you a moral relativist.
Well, okay, well, that's totally ridiculous and makes no sense
Why?
at all. And it only works. I'm about to answer, Konstantin. Let me finish. Because it only makes sense when you only say, I ascribe the worst of intentions to this regime and the best of intentions to this. What
are you talking? You don't have to ascribe the clock. We just learned about they have the clock. The clock. Israel countdown clock to Iran. What, you don't have to guess. Why do white people in the West, why do they do this? Why do they do this in the West where they're like, I can't possibly have any understanding or idea of what these people are thinking? Or like when Hassan is like, Hamas doesn't use human shields. And Hamas is like, our people are proud to serve as human shields. And they will stand on top of these buildings proudly to absorb Israeli bombs. Like, why? You're making excuses for them that they don't even make for themselves. Like, what are you talking about?
what was overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi? Was that simply replacing the leader?
Like, and it's all the bouncing to, what about Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, and other...
Is that destroying the country, turning it into a failed
You've
state?
brought in a different conflict. Let's stick to Israel and Iran.
No.
The Israeli
I want to talk about what the CIA, ex-CIA leaker said about what happened with Gaddafi.
say we want regime change. The Iranians say we want to wipe you off the map. Like, that's pretty different.
Hold on.
So I'm the moral relativist, and you don't want to pivot to this completely and totally different country that we can talk about?
No, I'm the moral relativist.
Yes.
And when I point out what one side actually did, you run away from it and say, oh, no, we can't talk about that.
It's your
Talk about
government that
something else.
destroyed Libya. It's not Israel.
Yeah, why are we talking about Israel and Libya? Actually, that was Israel because of the clean break memo in 1990.
It's your
do you know
government.
anything about this? Israel was lobbying for us to do this for years.
Who made the
and
decision
years
to do
In like 95, bro. When was the Libya stuff? How are they so bad? It took us like a fucking over a decade to do this. Hold on. Gaddafi, Libya, 2011? It's pretty ineffective propagandizing.
years. Our government, and I
Yes,
hold them
exactly.
criminally responsible.
So blame them.
Yes, Konstantin, why are you an Israeli? Why are you constantly running cover for them?
Like, he can't answer anything. It's such a joke. God, the fact that Joe Rogan has propped this fucking retard up, and now he's so high on his own...
Because I believe in speaking the truth and being honest instead of dragging in stuff that's irrelevant.
No. It's not irrelevant at all. What are you talking about? Yes, my government is criminally responsible for the war that they launched. And the Israeli government is also responsible for constantly trying to lure my government into more wars. That's what I'm standing up against right now.
So the American government is so gullible that they just go around invading countries on the say-so of Israel.
Again, what a straw man, dude. Benjamin Netanyahu came to America in 2002 and testified before Congress that the U.S. should overthrow Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, and the Iranian regime. This isn't a secret. He's advocating that we fight more wars. And I'm telling you that this war, which we do not need to fight.
So you agree with Constantine? The United States is just retarded and fell for it? Or what? Because Constantine just said we fought these wars for no reason then? It was just because Israel tricked us? And then you just said yes. So why did you say no? Like,
which is not in our interest, has the potential to be devastating to our country, let alone the region. What is the moral relativism in any of that?
I
I'm not saying
explain to
the
you what the moral
Iranians are good
relativism
people.
is. One side wants to wipe the other one from the map. The other side wants not to have people who want to do that in charge of that country.
But
That's
Piers,
the difference.
Piers, do you not get my... Let me just see, Piers,
do you understand? Remember Libya and Iraq and...
Get my point here. This is what they said from the very beginning of the war in Gaza. Israel doesn't want to wipe Gaza off the map. Israel just wants to retrieve the hostages and get it. But they are wiping it off the map. So why do you just get to have this standard where you decide what they want to do? I can't base it on their track record. We can't look at Iraq. We can't look at Libya. We can't look at Afghanistan. Evidently, as all the hawks can see, we can look at World War II. Everything is just like World War II. But it's not like the last 25 years.
As
These
you
guys
know,
have wiped countries off the map left and right.
Well, as you know,
It's what they've done. It's their track record.
What is everything like World War II? Or does he just mean like the Holocaust? Jesus.
Yeah, as you know, I've been increasingly critical of the Israel strategy in Gaza. It makes no sense until you hear people like Smodrich talking brazenly.
How do you explain Netanyahu saying those things years before they happened? How do I explain the head of the state of Israel talking about how he doesn't like all of the Arab leaders surrounding him who have, for decades, talked about how Israel needs to be annihilated as a country? Give me some time and I'll think about that. The tougher question would be, what are the chances that all of these leaders that Israel wanted gone would be eventually gone when a lot of these leaders are coming and going all the time anyway, you know? That's another really tough one. I'll think about that one too. Give me a month and I'll have a good answer for you.
and openly about ethnic cleansing. I mean, it doesn't make any pretense. And at that point, I do think that there are certainly people on that in that government at senior level who absolutely want to get all the Palestinians out of Gaza, out of the West Bank. And if that has been their plan all along from October the 8th, then I was duped, and people that feared that were correct. And we'll have to see how that plays itself out. I hope that is not going to actually be the case. And the people who say on the Israeli side, they say to me, well, Smotrich isn't the government. Well, he's a pretty senior member of that government, and he's not even hiding what he thinks should be happening. Before we finish this, guys, I want to talk about the politics here for Trump as well, because it's really interesting to me. Constantine, you've got the conservative right in America absolutely split down the middle. You've got Tucker Carlson on one side, and a lot of people who agree with him that this could be a disaster for America, for Trump. He shouldn't be doing it. Obviously, Dave and Tucker Carlson, now unusual bedfellows on this, but there's always a first time for everything. But you also have a lot of people on the conservative right, Lindsey Graham, John Bolton, others who are absolutely gung-ho to get stuck into Iran here. Is there a danger that politically this really does fragment Trump's base support? And what does that mean for the Republicans, for MAGA, for Trump, for the future, for J.D. Vance and people who are aligned with Trump maybe at the next election and so on?
Well, I should preface this by saying I'm an outside observer in the United States. I do go there a lot. I spend a lot of time there. I speak to people there, but I certainly wouldn't claim to be, the greatest expert in the world about what's happening in America. My sense, unexpert sense of this, is that actually I think your presentation of it is a very online-focused presentation. I think if you look at the polling, the vast majority of people in America are basically in the position I described earlier, which is they don't want Iran to get anywhere near or continue to get closer to developing nuclear weapons, and they don't want American boots on the ground. And that's the dilemma that Donald Trump has to navigate. And if you can do that...
Well, there's a third dilemma. So this is where it gets more complicated, because I don't think he's even thinking about boots on the ground, but I do think he is thinking probably as we speak about whether he allows an American B-52 to take a 30,000-pound bomb and drop it on the nuclear sites, which Israel hasn't got the ability to get to.
Yeah.
I think that is probably more likely than not right now.
So let's be honest,
what he may order.
if that happens and it's successful and it doesn't lead to an escalation, everyone's going to love it because Americans love to win and they love...
Damn! Constantine comes out and says it! But we're not going to talk about this point at all.
To bomb shit, right? Let's be honest. That's the history of the last 20 years. And if that happens, they'll be very happy. And if it goes in a different direction, they will be very unhappy. So you're right. It's a big call. I don't think anyone sitting here, or frankly anywhere, knows how it's actually going to play out or whether it's a good idea. And I'm not sitting here advocating for that necessarily. I think Israel seems to be doing enough damage to significantly degrade any attempts Iran is making to have a nuclear enrichment program. And I hope that's the thing that we pursue. By the way, I don't think it's split MAGA down the middle at all. That's what it appears like on X. I really don't think when you talk to ordinary people that's the situation in America, especially in the Republican Party, which is overwhelmingly pro-Israel and has been for a very long time.
Okay, Dave Smith.
There's no question. I mean, I largely agree with Constantine there. I think if Trump can thread the needle here and not lead to a catastrophe, that he can survive this politically. I do think he's downplaying the split a little bit. It's not just about polls about how people feel about boots on the ground.
But America is still acting out on behalf of Israel, not saying there's a conspiracy element to it, but there is no doubt America conducts military action on behalf of Israel, right? I mean, kind of, but our interests are largely aligned. So, I mean, it's going to appear that way as well, right? America conducted military operations on behalf of, or were the interests of Western Europe in World War II or I. Not because they're controlling us, it's because our interests were aligned for a variety of reasons.
Ground, which obviously the American people are largely opposed to. And yes, it is
war in Korea or Vietnam or whatever.
True that most of the Republicans do support Israel, although poll after poll has demonstrated that this is really changing with the younger generation. But look, I mean, you have a situation right now, and yesterday, I started the day by denouncing Donald Trump, and I was taking a lot, trending on Twitter and getting a lot of praise and a lot of insults and all that stuff. But by the end of the day, it was like Tucker Carlson was being insulted by Donald Trump for not even criticizing him, really just criticizing the policy while heaping praise on Donald Trump. But Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, I mean, some of the most influential conservative voices in the United States of America have all come out and really drawn a red line that we do not want to have another war here. So the point is that if it does get to that, and that's a big if, but if it does come to that point...
So what is Dave Smith's problem? The implementation of America's interests around the world? He's just an isolationist. He's retarded. He doesn't have a problem. He hasn't even thought about this enough to have a problem. His perspective is going to be completely defined by, we all learned this when I was growing up, all the people that were libertarian for a while, we all learned this term called blowback from Iraq, and it traumatized us. And the idea is basically, if the United States intervenes literally in any point ever in the world ever, it's always going to come back to us always in the worst possible way ever in a horrible terrorist attack always. And so America can't intervene anywhere ever. That's the whole analysis. It's fucking retarded.
Like a real boots on the ground war, Donald Trump will absolutely destroy his coalition and his legacy along with it, as well as his entire domestic agenda. I mean, you need as much political capital as you can get when there's people out on the streets protesting against his immigration policies, and he's risking squandering all of this for something that's absolutely no threat to the United States of America at all, on the side of the country who secretly developed nukes and is not in the non-proliferation treaty, against the country who doesn't have nukes and is in the non-proliferation treaty. It's the most reckless madness of a policy could possibly be.
Well, he's not pursuing that policy. This is what the point I keep making to Dave. What you keep doing, Dave, is taking to the extremist position. No one's talking about boots on the ground except the usual Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not even what we're really debating right now, right? But
So no one in the Trump cabinet takes seriously on these issues at all.
I don't know about that.
They don't. The conversation that's happening is about what is the right level of America's involvement. We will see what that is. And by the way, look, I haven't seen Charlie Kirk, who is genuinely influential, I think, within the MAGA movement, criticize President Trump. I think he's been kind of balanced in his commentary. All the other people, the Candace Owens, the Tucker Carlsons, etc., the vast majority of people within the conservative movement in America are not taking their opinion on this issue, and the polls bear that out.
Tucker, though,
I would say
Tucker,
people
I think, is a significant voice.
People with huge audiences.
Well,
I'm not saying they don't have huge audiences, but I'm saying a lot of those audiences are not within the conservative movement.
Right, but when Tucker chewed up Ted Cruz, for example, and did it pretty skillfully, I have to say, made Cruz look pretty ill-informed about Iran. That's got a massive amount of mainstream media attention today. I think that you can't ignore. I mean, it's interesting to me. Look at the split. The MAGA names against Trump: Candace Owens, you, Dave, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, Matt Walsh, Tucker Carlson. Obviously, then you got the ones for Charlie Kirk's been pretty balanced, like you said, Lindsey Graham, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Mark Levine. I mean, I've not seen that kind of split on many issues, and this is potentially the biggest issue of all.
Can I just even responding to what Constantine just said, because I thought I made this point pretty clear at the beginning, but let me try to make it clear. You can sit here and
Iraq, Libya, CIA, Al Qaeda. What are we going to bring up?
and say nobody's talking about boots on the ground all you want to. This whole thing is about a regime change, and all of the major players have admitted that
you don't need boots on the ground for a regime change. You retarded fuck. You literally accused the United States of doing regime change in Ukraine, and we didn't have boots on the ground for that. So why are you even...
about boots on the ground all you want to. This whole thing is about a regime change, and all of the major players have admitted this in their own words. Even Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't saying that Iran was on the cusp of having nuclear weapons.
That could be regime change. But Dave, that could be regime change, as we saw in Syria towards the end of last year in December, when after a long and bloody and awful civil war, suddenly the downfall of Assad happened incredibly quickly, and it didn't involve boots on the ground in any conventional sense. It involved...
What? How are we defining incredibly quickly there?
Suddenly the downfall of Assad happened incredibly quickly.
Incredibly quickly after like 15 years of civil war, I guess. Okay.
It didn't involve boots on the ground in any conventional sense. It involved actual Syrian boots from civilians.
That's right.
And they were able to... That's why I see... I don't think it can be ruled out that if enough Iranian people feel that their regime has been humiliated, has actually been exposed for not being able to hit back in the way they've always vowed to, feel that they're weak and disgraced and so on, why couldn't there be an uprising like we saw in Syria at the end of last year? I don't think it can be ruled out.
Well, I mean, listen, so Piers, just to be clear, because you are right about that. There are the models like Libya and Syria where it didn't require long occupations and nation building, and all you got was a failed state with open-air slave markets, a massive refugee crisis into Europe, and now you have Al-Qaeda in charge of Syria. And excuse me, as an American, my beef is with Al-Qaeda, not with Hezbollah.
He is not behaving.
What is Al-Qaeda? Okay, I don't know.
Like a member of Al-Qaeda. Now he's a leader of the country. He appears to be.
Oh, so that's okay.
I'm not taking anything.
All right.
Listen, I don't take any, as Donald Trump once says, I don't trust anyone, right? So let's see
I'm not saying trust.
Let's see how it plays out.
Here. Hold on. Piers, I'm not saying trust. This man was fighting against America in the Iraq War, part of the insurgents, killing our boys. So why am I supposed to care about
but then Nelson
Mandela...
Nelson Mandela was on the UK's prescribed terrorist list under Margaret Thatcher and went on to become one of the greatest people in history and led his country to a more unified place. In other words, Trump is taking a bet that this new leader in Syria actually is a reformed character. And certainly, so far, you would have to say that the signs are reasonably encouraging, given the apocalyptic feelings that some people had, that he would simply be Mr. Al-Qaeda presiding over complete mayhem.
And one thing is worth adding, by the way, on this, is that Iran has a history... Iran, just a quick point, Dave, very quick. Iran has a history of 25 years or maybe 26 years of living in a secular and relatively liberal free society. So the people of Persia have a very different history to the countries you're talking about. This is not to say that regime change or the change of a regime does not lead to catastrophe. And
there's no obvious... someone wrote a very good piece about this. There is no obvious savior waiting in the wings other than the Shah's son, who is a quite divisive character. I've interviewed him, I like him personally, but divisive character. But there's no Mandela figure that you could point to and say is waiting in the wings to potentially come and rescue Iran. That person so far hasn't been identified.
Can I just make a couple quick points on this? Okay, so number one, we launched 25 years of what are dubbed forever wars on the justification that Al-Qaeda came over here and murdered innocent American citizens. And now I'm supposed to make up with Al-Qaeda and forgive them for that because he put on a three-piece suit while I focus on Israel's enemies?
Yeah, countries and groups and shit change over time. What kind of fuck? He's an actual child, especially in the Middle East. Holy shit. Why would you analyze any group exactly the same as they were 20, 25 years ago? Take them for where they're at now, or look at the past 5 or 10 years of actions. Like, what are the last decades of Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks on the United States? Or like, are we supposed to work with Germany now? Are we supposed to work with Japan now? Are we supposed to work after World War II? Or any? This is just like such a stupid fucking view on everything. Like, everybody in the Middle East at some point has been involved in some group or whatever that is fucking tried to kill us or tried to kill somebody else. Like, what is the standard of working or cooperating with somebody?
I just find this to be like a crazy ask of the American people. And then, look, it's real easy to sit here and say, oh yeah, they had a strong tradition of liberalism and everything's going to work out this time. For the first time, we're going to have a regime change that's going to work out really smoothly. Iran is so weak. The people hate them so much. This regime has been in power since 1979, spending the vast majority of that time having the most powerful governments in the history of the world hell-bent on ousting this regime, and they've survived this long. Maybe you guys are right this time, but Piers, come on, man. I mean, you remember the mission accomplished banners. You remember when they had the first elections in Iraq, and it even fooled Jon Stewart, and he was celebrating, oh, I guess George W. Bush was right. And then we went on to the most brutal and bloody 8 years of civil war that saw 1 million innocent people die, the country absolutely destroyed, massive displacements and horror stories. And so, it's like, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, and maybe it'll make you a little bit uncomfortable, but the amount of people celebrating this thing 4 or 5 days into it, like, oh my God, Israel took out all their targets. Look how easy it was. We've been here before. I've seen this movie.
I'll be honest with you, Dave, as someone who's not pushing regime change.
Everything is Iraq, by the way.
Or American involvement, as I've said, in the way that you think people are trying to do. I am celebrating the fact that Iran is no longer enriching uranium to 60%. I think that is worth celebrating. I think that's a good thing. I think we should all be relieved that that's happening.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but I also agree with
maybe.
Dave Smith when he says this could go
He's just so stupid. Ugh.
horribly wrong.
But that's what we're all saying. I'm saying that too.
Yeah, I agree.
This is war. Like, no one knows how it's going to turn out exactly.
I agree. I mean, I've gone as far as...
That's why we don't get into any wars. He's so smart. He's so smart. That's why we should just never get into any wars ever. Oh my God. Genius moment.
But that's what we're all saying. I'm saying that too.
Yeah, I agree.
This is war. Like, no one knows how it's going to turn out exactly.
I agree. I mean, I've gone as far as saying... Well, I've gone as far as saying I think that unlike the Iran...
Don't fight a war of choice. Wait until you're forced to fight. That's always the best time to fight.
War in 2003. I feel like this seems a justified action by Israel to protect its people from what is clear a fast-moving acceleration of uranium by a lethal enemy that is wedded to terror groups all over its border that want to kill it. I understand that. It seems justified. Now, does that mean I think it's going to work and isn't going to cause huge problems? No. And I think the jury is very firmly out on that. And it's going to be an extremely fascinating and turbulent few weeks and months ahead. And I think right now, Donald Trump, probably the loneliest man in the world, sitting in the White House, working out what does he actually do now. And if he does press the button on attacking Iran, that will go really against pretty much everything he said, other than specifically Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. But in terms of starting a war in the Middle East, that is really antithetical against everything he's said he stands for. So it's a really interesting, momentous decision for Donald Trump to be taking, and the consequences could be enormous. But gentlemen, I've really enjoyed this debate. Thank you both for agreeing to do it. I think it was constructed in the right tone. We didn't descend into ad hominem attacks.
Can I just say I have a much bigger penis than you, Piers, and you, Dave.
That's actually almost certainly not true.
We will reference to the George Galloway episode yesterday.
And Dave Smith, we all know, is the most well hung of the three of us. So why don't we just leave it with Dave Smith for the win?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Constantine. Thank you, Piers.
Thanks, brother.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
I'm assuming that was a reference to some Twitter fight or whatever.